Keep talk. Oh, dear me. That was a great start. Is that okay, everyone? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, my name is Natasha Kidd, and I'm an artist. I make things. And I'm the subject leader in art at the School of Art, Film and Media. And I'm also the Deputy Director of the Centre for Creative and Cultural Industries here at Bath Spa University. I'm also part of the team working on the Bath Challenge project. Here we are. So welcome to our Bath Challenge opening, Inventing Other Ways to Go. Many thanks for giving up your time on an amazing evening out there. This is a blended event with an audience here, sat in our Locksbrook Road campus presentation space, which we haven't sat in for a very long time, so it's so lovely to have you here, and a live stream with people joining us from their homes. For those of you at home, we are broadcasting from Bath School of Art, Film and Media. So if we get an interruption, it's probably like a student running by or something. For those of us in the building, let's cover some housekeeping. The toilets in this building are on this level. They're along the long walls of the building, kind of running parallel with the river. If the fire alarm goes off, it's not a test. So we make our way out of that door, out of the front entrance, over to the car park. Once you're out of the building, we'll gather over there. For those of you at home, I'm presuming you know where your own toilets are and where the nearest exits are. On the screen here, with the title Housekeeping, as a playful way to introduce some of the more practical things I needed to cover, you'll see the work of Mariel Lederman Ukulele. Made in the early 70s, Ukulele moved what she considered her maintenance works as a mother and a housekeeper into the site of the gallery. Here we see her cleaning the steps. In 1969, Ukulele wrote her Maintenance Art Manifesto, in which she proclaimed that maintenance tasks, such as domestic chores and child rearing, could be performed as creative acts. She turned her maintenance work into maintenance art. She suggested it was a way to keep her life as a mother and artist together. She said, "I'm an artist. I need to be who I am, and this is who I am." Ukulele played an important role in the development of the practice of artists as activists and the use of artistic ideas to alter attitudes in society. The Bath Challenge team is interested in the work art or creativity can do, not just as an outcome, but as a verb. So, I'm an artist. I've said that twice now. I say it a lot, actually. So because I like talking about what I know and love, I'm going to talk about art and what artists do as a way to tease out some of the thinking, or more importantly, the doing in the Bath Challenge project. So, what does the evening look like? At 6, we'll move, well, hopefully, probably a bit later than that. At 6, we'll move to the panel discussion, chaired by Stephen Hilton. The panel will discuss, as a starting point, one of the key questions the challenge has posed. What conditions are needed to nurture a creative community? After the panel discussion, we'll say goodbye to our audience at home, and we'll move out of the presentation space to talk with the artists' collaboration, MASH, about their work. At 7:30, we'll meet outside and we'll walk to Western Island to talk about the potential of this site as a co-owned creative hub for our city. Along the way, we'll encounter briefly some of the history of the place. At 8 o'clock, we'll go to the pub, most importantly. Join us. to continue our discussion. In the image on this slide, you'll see one of Onkawara's date paintings from his Today series. You might know them. Kawara began these paintings on the 4th of January 1966, and he continued making them every day until his death in 2014. The works were produced according to a strict set of parameters. Each was painted during the course of a single day and was rendered in one of 8 possible sizes. Each painting could take anywhere from 4 to 7 hours, depending on its size. Any work not completed in the day was destroyed. Although they give the impression of having been stenciled, the letters and numbers are hand-drawn, and the painting's made with multiple flat coats of paint. What I love is that he made the work even when he travelled, making a more manageable size when he was away from home. Each of the date paintings is accompanied by a newspaper from the day and place that Kawara painted the work. What you'll notice from the works and images that I'm sharing with you is that I'm more interested in exposing the process or processes of art rather than the outcome. Here we see Onkawara's desk, his paintbrushes, and a painting in the making. Art as a verb, the doing or shifting of value away from the outcome has been at the heart of the whole Bath Challenge project, as you will see. So, what is the Bath Challenge? I did get there eventually. The Bath Challenge project was set up to think about the challenges specific to the creative community in Bath and gain a better understanding of what the barriers are that prevent a greater sense of connectivity in our creative community. The Bath Challenge project set out to understand what the challenge is for Bath's creative community and what could be done to fix it. But the Bath Challenge hasn't mapped out the issues or proposed the solutions. In asking the question in a different way, through walking and talking, or through talking and making, the Bath Challenge has valued the process of coming together over any definable or measurable outcome. This is When Faith Moves Mountains by Frances Elise. I love this work. In this piece, Elise managed to persuade 500 participants, made up of locals situated on the outskirts of Lima in Peru, to help move a hill, one shovel at a time. The 500 volunteers formed a line at the bottom of a large dune. The volunteers moved sand from the dune and positioned it about 4 inches or 10 centimetres from its original spot, creating a brand new mountain. Shoveling in unison, displacing the dune by a few inches, participants in the project gave their time for free, reversing conservative economic principles of efficiency and production. The project, documented in photographs and videos, served the purpose of a social parable. The action of moving the dune was transitory, and no one could recognise that the sand had even been moved from its original position the next day. The aftermath and the success of the project lay in its capacity to effectively induce conversation. Elise always aims to make work that continues beyond the duration of the event itself. Although we make no claim to have moved a mountain, we know the Bath Challenge project has induced conversations and become part of the creative hum of the city. So, what are the component parts of the Bath Challenge? How do you hold the microphone and your notes at the same time? So, what are the component parts of the Bath Challenge? Well, the Bath Challenge commissioned a researcher, Jonathan Eldridge. Jonathan was selected because of his interest in walking as a method for talking with the creative community of Bath Let's hear what Jonathan has to say about his research and his approach.
Hello everyone, my name is John. Hello everyone, my name is John. I was the researcher on the Bath Challenge project. I lived in Bath both in and out of lockdown while studying for an MA in Environmental Humanities. I'm sorry I can't be there today. I'm just giving a short introductory talk on the project itself. Now, the climate crisis, Black Lives Matter movement and a global pandemic have shifted how we perceive, live and act. And creativity and the industries that support it have a vital role to play in responding to this and navigating future challenges. But the right conditions need to be there in order for those responses to be relevant, fair and inclusive. Now, the Bath Challenge project focused on creative ecology, so the interdependencies between different creative entities, how these creative entities come into being, why some succeed and others fail, as well as the relationships between them. And the challenge in the Bath Challenge project was that it was felt by some that Bath's creative ecology was more fragmented than cohesive, defined more by competition than collaboration. And funded by Bristol and Bath Creative Research and Development, this project sought to explore the barriers to collaboration within Bath's creative industries, as well as what sort of long-term impacts the creative industries could have in Bath's various communities, and the role that the creative industries could play in Bath's future trajectory and post-pandemic recovery. And the project built on previous work by Bath Bridge and the One Shared Vision report, as well as contextualising itself nationally and with relevance to WECA's recovery ambitions. And maybe part of the challenge has also been the fact that this was a very broad brief and it has been quite difficult to pull everything together, but hopefully we have done so in a way which is both interesting, informative and engaging. I'd just like to talk a little bit about my own approach to the research. Now, walking interviews have been central to this, and I feel that they help reduce mental inertia and keep conversations rooted in the city itself rather than an interview room. And I tried to keep these conversations as open as possible, and some people found this difficult and others found it sort of therapeutic, sort of giving a chance to explore their own feelings about Bath and its creative economy. Now, this methodological choice might not seem like the most radical challenge, but I think getting outside and exploring the city can allow us to better understand the physical, structural and conceptual barriers that prevent greater inclusivity. For example, I know that whilst Bath is a very walkable city, it is often criticised as being not very accessible for disabled people. Faith in the connecting work that walking does, so connecting different parts of the city together, connecting ideas through conversations, and encouraging a framework for mutually productive relationships has sort of been a very grounding influence in this research for me. And the project has remained reflective, flexible, and open to clashes of opinion. We don't need to agree on everything, and I'm sure we don't. This is not the point of doing things together. The point is that when things are done together, the results are more relevant, people feel less excluded, and trust is bolstered. The multiple crises we are facing do not call for us to remain comfortable, especially those of us who have the power to galvanise change, but to be pushed out of our lanes, to be open to different ways of doing things, and embrace the spirit of genuine collaboration. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Hello, everyone.
Want to hear it again? So many artists have understood the value of walking as a research method. Walking provides a healthy, therapeutic and socially distanced way for interviewer and interviewee to be present together. Tim Ingold suggests that when we talk opposite one another, as is standard, ideas are bounced back and forth as if in competition, but when we walk side by side, we share virtually the same visual field. Walking and talking, setting out with an open mind, seeing what ideas emerge, this is, in essence, a shared creative endeavour. At a basic level, not everyone is able to walk for reasons of disability, access, or simply because they are busy with other commitments. So the digital can help us address this, providing a flexible way for people to participate in their own time on their own terms. So the Bath Challenge has brought people together in different ways. It's commissioned the artist collaboration MASH, valuing the process of talking with art and making as a form of research. MASH, the name of the collective, are alumni of this school. Over the past weeks, they've run virtual and physical workshops with the creative community of the city. They're at the beginning of their career. Their practice brings together people through the act of playful making. They'll tell you more about it when we've done after the panel discussion, when they speak outside with their work. Through commissioning Jonathan and MASH, the Bath Challenge has actively supported the next generation of creatives in the city. The project has supported them to embrace the messiness of our research journey, and it's been quite messy. But it's championed a process rather than simply mapping or defining an endpoint. It's no coincidence that we're hosting this event here at our art and design campus. This space and the disciplines learnt here actively encourage messy, iterative, searching inquiry and making as a way of finding things out. We know spaces shape society and society shapes space. So we, as a creative community, have to make suggestions for the types of spaces we want, how they could be used, and make them open and accessible. Our studio, or innovation hub at Palace Yard Mews, run by the brilliant Abigail Brannigan, is key to this. The studio and the art school we're standing in now play an essential role in supporting and sustaining and nurturing our future creative community, offering them a space to not know, to play, to fail, make a mess in order to find something out. I'm going to hand over to Dan Allen, the head of art, film and media, to give a brief overview of the role the art school can play in sustaining our creative community. So let's hear from Dan, who's got COVID, so he's quite coughy in this.
Hello everyone, my name's Dan Allen. I'm the head of school at Bath School of Art, Film and Media. A really warm welcome to everyone for the Bath Challenge event at our fantastic Locksbrook campus. I'm just sorry I can't be with you tonight. What is the role an art school can play in the community? Well, firstly, perhaps it's best to articulate what an art school actually is in order to understand the role our art school plays for our students, our community, and for the wider world. The art school is a space for making and thinking. It's a place for experimentation, inquiry, a place that recognises the value uncertainty plays in making sense of things. This is why we place such an emphasis on play, on empowering students to be excited by not knowing the answers, of trusting instinct and seeing where it takes you. Trusting in intuition also disempowers predetermined judgments and offers the artist an opportunity to expand their own perspectives by questioning their own views and their own experiences. Creating the right environment is critical to an art school's success. To do its job, an art school has to establish a physical and ideological place where individuals can flourish. It has to be an open, tolerant, inclusive environment that celebrates difference as the cornerstone of society. A place where there is no right or wrong, just difference. And not only is difference okay, it's a really good thing. Why does a community need an art school? Well, look around you at what's happening in the world. As art offers a new dimension and a different way of seeing things, the art school has the potential to bring about positive change within communities and in the wider world. While art doesn't exist without a world to react to or a community to engage with, an art school can liberate and galvanise a community. It can make it more tolerant and equally transformative. It can make a community more collegiate and more aspirational. These ideologies of an art school can perhaps be best evidenced in the design of our Locksbrook campus. Although the pandemic has been an obstacle, the foundations have been laid for the art school to develop a new, more engaged relationship with the city. This means a permeable campus that invites and exposes the community to art in new ways. Through our gallery programme that invites people into the building, but also our canteen, our shop, and through the intoxicating energy and enthusiasm of our brilliant students, we've created a welcoming, non-hierarchical environment that harnesses a breadth of creative practices and celebrates diversity, inclusivity, and ambition. Locksbrook campus has also been designed as a place that fosters creative collaboration with professionals, with graduates, and with other creative organisations. It's a facility that reaches beyond our students and staff. It offers a new layer of support for creative practitioners through access to facilities and in the purchase of specialist materials. If we get it right, then the art school will also establish new audiences, exposing individuals to the value of creativity that would otherwise have been missed. Our art school is currently leading the Bath wing of a £1.2 million Arts Council England project to roadmap visual arts in the southwest of England. And so we're already playing an increasingly supportive and transformative role for the arts in the city and the region. Our Locksbrook campus needs not to be an intimidating place. And so I hope we've achieved this through the choice of materials that we've used in its construction, the colours we've chosen, and in the celebration of the building's industrious past by holding on to the integrity of the building's DNA. The location of the technical workshops at the heart of the building, flanked by spaces for making stuff, has also been carefully thought through as it promotes that sense of play and thinking through making that's so integral to our core values as an institution. It's our campus. But in this sense, our campus is our community's campus. And our community is extended beyond our students and staff. It's a community that has expanding and permeable walls. Our sense of community may have its nucleus within this building, but the art school's already playing a leading role in a much bigger movement. Our community now includes all of you here tonight, and this community will bring about a positive change for this region, starting with a creative quarter for the city of Bath. And ending, well, there really is no ending point, provided that we all work together to bring about positive change. Thank you.
So like the art school, we're standing in the Bath Challenge's foregrounded process over outcome. In the months that follow, the Bath Challenge will release a document that shares the learning, the processes, the walks, and our listening. The document may even include future walks we can take together. The Bath Challenge project has thought about creativity as a verb, not a desire or an outcome. Practicing art or creativity as an object that can be either bought or exhibited confirms and reproduces the importance of the market. Practicing art or creativity in more social terms explores and reproduces it in a way that can be applied and have value in other ways. Being here and having this conversation together, we're creating a setting, we're providing the conditions for a system to be reproduced and strengthened. Something might be starting in the city, a creative hum. Rather than simply identifying the problem, we might already be in the solution. So to end, this is Yielding Stone by Gabrielle Orofco. It's one of my favourite things. It's a black lump of plasticine that's the weight of the artist's body. The work is rolled onto the street where this highly malleable and greasy material absorbs whatever residues it encounters. The work's in process, but its impressions from the past form only a part of its story. Yielding Stone is in a perpetual process of becoming. If the work is nostalgic, it's not because it harks back to some idealized past, but because it's nostalgic for the future. Most importantly, the work needs to be activated. It needs to be rolled out through the city so it can be reshaped. It's my great pleasure now to hand over to Stephen Hilton to host our panel for the evening, to talk together with us about how we can shape the future of our city by acting together in the present. Many thanks for listening, and over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Natasha, and to Jonathan and Dan on the screen. As Natasha said, I'm Steve Hilton. I've worked as a member of the Bath Challenge team over the last 6 months or so, and it's my pleasure to now share a discussion around not only the challenges, but as Natasha said, the solutions and the future that Bath might move towards. We've got a great panel, so I'm going to ask the panel to come up, and then I'll say a bit about how we're going to organise ourselves. So Professor Kate Pullinger, Poppy Clover, Nicola Turner, and Alexandra Coulter. And I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves in a bit more detail in a second. So we recognise that process is important, and you heard both Natasha and John use a phrase that was something like, what are the conditions that are required to make a creative community? I'm going to take my chair's privilege and reframe that question slightly. I'm going to ask each of my panelists to speak for a couple of minutes, firstly to introduce themselves, but also then to say something about what they think are the ingredients that go into making a creative place. So perhaps we start at the end with Kate. So Kate, please introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you think those ingredients look like.
Thanks, Stephen. I am not Rebecca DeCorpo, who I should be, but Rebecca couldn't be with us tonight, so I was dragooned into the panel at the last minute. So I'm Kate Pullinger. I'm a writer. I'm a novelist, and I work with digital media as well. And I work here at Bath Spa, where I run the Centre for Cultural and Creative Industries, which is a kind of strategic research center that tries to pull together some of our activity our research activity in the university across those themes. And I'm also the academic lead on our enterprise and innovation space in the center of Bath, which Tash showed a slide of, the studio. This is our banner here. We house creative technology micro businesses in the studio. So it's a kind of the university's first step really into kind of incubation space. We were due to open on the 31st of March 2020. We will have our official opening toward the end of June. So that's who I am. So, Stephen, it was what are the ingredients?
So what are the ingredients? Give us a sense of what you think some of the ingredients are that go into making a successful creative place.
Well, I think, I mean, I think it's obviously it's about people, but it's also about some kind of key drivers that I think can help support activity of that kind. Hopefully, an institution like a university acts as an anchor institution for activity of that kind, and I think that's one of the things that BASPA's trying to do currently. One of the more recent things that's happened in the university is that it's becoming a social enterprise. It's one of only, I think it's 5 universities in the UK that is becoming a social enterprise. So really, it's about trying to enable conversations, trying to provide opportunities for people to network, and that the whole thing about the creative collision, which is one of the things that the pandemic took away from us. The business of when you put people together in a room and ask them to think together, the kind of sparks that fly, the kind of ideas that can come out of that are really key to, I think, moving forward any kind of creative conversation in any place.
Thank you, Kate. We'll come back to some of those thoughts as we go through the discussion. But next, so Poppy, Clover, you're an artist, you're a curator. Say a little bit more about yourself and answer the same question. What are the ingredients that you think are most tasty?
Okay. So yes, I'm a maker, and within BASPA, I'm a curator and technical demonstrator. So I run our 3 exhibition spaces over 2 campuses. And not only do I help students to physically make their work and help them produce it, I also help them to think about ways of displaying and installing and giving them opportunities to have exhibitions and events within the campus and also the city as well. I think ingredients-wise, as I said, people are very important, but I think it's the opportunities that you give those people. You need to make space for those creatives to express their ideas and physically put them into a space or a city. Collaboration is a really important thing to me, and I think an important thing when it comes to thinking about what a city needs to be creative. And I think it's thinking about how artists can collaborate with non-artists. I think that's a really important thing. So looking at other ways of being creative and putting artists in contact with those people within a city.
Very good, thank you. Again, we will come back to some of those points that you raised. Thank you. So let's skip to the end. So Alex Coulter, say a few words about yourself. Thank you for coming along today from Oxford. And then say what you think the ingredients are of a creative place, or how you might wish to frame the creative place.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks. Yes, I'm Alex Coulter, and I'm director of an organisation called Arts and Health Southwest, which is a regional learning, advocacy, networking and development organisation. And I was involved in a national inquiry led by an all-party parliamentary group on arts, health and well-being, which led to the publication of a report called Creative Health in 2017. And recommendation 1 in that report was to set up a national strategic centre, which we set up about a year ago, called the National Centre for Creative Health, and I am director of that now. So I did think I would slightly reframe the question and say, what are the key ingredients for a creative health place? And what would it look like if Bath was a creative health city? And not to make you feel competitive, but Manchester is aiming to become the first creative health city region, and that is linking it to what is called the Marmot City Region programme, which is also about place, but it's about the social determinants which determine how healthy we are, how long our lives are, and how long we live. And that is about what are the conditions in which we are born, grow, live, work, and age, and how that impacts on our quality of life. and our health. And I think one of the interesting things about creativity for me is that I think it's at the heart of human flourishing, and I like the fact you've got the word flourish on that banner. And human flourishing as a concept goes right back to Aristotle. And often a lot of health professionals prefer the word flourishing to the word well-being. You're all familiar with how well-being has sort of seeped into policy and into cultural policy. But I think there's a real bridging thing between place in cultural policy and place in health. And so this notion of place, which we can think of as something that really matters to people, but also can have a very negative impact on their lives. So it's that sort of crossover that I think is interesting. And in terms of the ingredients to make that a place both creative and healthy, if you think about health creation, then I would put co-production and co-creation right at the heart of it. So that is the people that you want to impact in terms of this place, that they are at the heart of the creativity. So how can that work? And I think Poppy started to talk about that, the relationship between artists and non-artists. How do people make creativity and make a creative place would be the main thing for me.
Thank you, and thank you for your very welcome challenge around the sort of framing and the definition. So lastly, Nicola, I know you're a celebrated artist and you have a long history of being involved in initiatives locally, but say a little bit more about yourself and answer the same question about what for you are those important ingredients or conditions.
Yes, I'm an artist based in Bath. I actually did my MA in Fine Art at Bath Spa University, graduating in 2019. Before that, I had a history of working as a scenographer internationally, so designing sets and costumes for opera, theatre, ballet around the world, which actually gave me a great access to how other cities work and actually how culture is embedded in other cities. I moved to Bath in the area of Bath in 2003, and I was on the Bath Public Realm and Movement Strategy Design Panel, which formed a document about the public realm spaces in Bath. And so I guess I've always had an interest in the space in between buildings and the space where people meet and the accidental conversations you might have and how that works in a city. And I'm also one of the founding directors of Bath Art Depot, which is trying to create an arts quarter on Western Island where we'll walk to later this evening. And as for creative space, I loved the document, the government document, Arts and Culture, Health and Wellbeing. I thought that was amazing. And I guess for me, it's like creating a space where it has rough edges. It's where people can have a sense of freedom, can experiment, can try things out, can actually accidentally meet other people. A space where kind of all people in the city have a sense of belonging, so they don't feel intimidated by the space. They might accidentally come across the space, kind of sit down, start conversations with people. And so for me, it's kind of having kind of a breeding ground in the city, kind of accidental spaces, experimentation, kind of unpredictable spaces. You don't know what's going to happen. But that kind of embedded and intertwined with what daily life is going on in the city itself.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to come back to you and ask you more about that sense of space that creates or facilitates creative collisions, which I think is how Kate phrased it. So we'll come back to that in a second. So my main job for the rest of this panel is to keep us to time. So we will speak for about another 50 minutes. During that time, there will be plenty of time for me to come to the audience, both in the auditorium and online, for questions. So do start thinking about the questions that you have now around the topic of creativity and culture and place, or questions that you would like to address outside of that. But I'm first going to sort of go around the panel again and pick out some of the topics that I think are interesting, both in terms of what people have said, but also chime with the issues that have bubbled through the research that Jonathan has done in recent months. And I really wanted to start with Nicola and picking up that point around creating places that allow for serendipity and chance encounter. And I wondered what your thoughts were on how well Bath achieves that. Is it the sort of place where you accidentally bump into people and have those creative encounters? Or is there more that the city might do in order to enable that type of interaction?
Okay. Well, as I said, I was on the Bath Public Realm and Movement strategy that put together this programme with all these kind of examples of how you can use the public realm in the city. And also Bath also has the kind of Bath Riverside plan, which shows that kind of maps out the area around the city and how it can be kind of brought to life. And I actually think there's a lot in those two documents that would be really exciting if that had happened or if things had been taken on board. And I think Bath, for me, kind of seeing the potential, recently the square outside the Theatre Royal has been redone. And I sat in many discussions, you know, talking about the square outside the Bordeaux Opera House, or how these places can really kind of buzz with life and kind of create spaces for conversation and everything. And yet I feel when I go there, it's kind of slightly disappointing, the kind of benches all facing the same way, and the kind of restaurant with all their kind of guarded seating with flowers. It's just not conducive to feeling kind of free and invited and a place to kind of hang out and make conversations. And also, if you look, if you walk along the river now, there's been a lot of development on the south side. And, when I've walked along there, it's pretty dead. There's not much. You wouldn't say it's alive. And, having spent a lot of time working in Aarhus, they really did up their river. And it's thriving. Students are hanging out, people kind of, in just all these different spaces that have been created. And I think the space in between buildings and the space kind of existing, in corridors and areas could be really conducive to actually, starting these kind of conversations that just appear. So I think actually, although on paper Bath has started to explore this, I'm not sure actually if we've actually seen it through, how well it could be seen through. And I think the history of Bath with the kind of wide pavements to promenade, and it was a city where you did kind of just go and bump into people and talk. And now it's kind of slightly dominated by cars, and it's just, I think it's got so much potential, Bath.
Clearly it's not for lack of strategy or policy or insight or case studies from other cities internationally. What do you think the nub of the challenge is? It's a very hard thing to put your finger on, but do you have any insights about what might need to give in order for more of that to happen?
I think the city needs to be braver and actually kind of really go for these things, personally. And I think there's always it comes down at the end when you're talking to property developers about how much they will invest in this public realm if they build a building. I mean, I'm not an expert in this whatsoever, but just seeing kind of when you have kind of property development going on, a lot is kind of for the financial gain, how much will, this make us in the short term. And actually, I think investing in the kind of the life of the city, you have to have kind of lungs in a city, a breathing space, spaces for people to kind of hang out and kind of exist and be, rather than, I don't know.
No, I think that it is complicated, and I think there's something in what you've said around how value is counted that is at the heart of that. And if the value is skewed towards the economic, then you get a certain set of outcomes. And perhaps we'll pick that up in a second, but thank you. I was interested, Poppy, in your sort of experience, both as a curator of sort of creative content and the curator of a space where interaction happens, but you were also a student in Bath. And I wondered what your sense was about how the city provides opportunities for its students. We certainly know that there's perhaps an issue about students not staying once they complete their course, but what's your sense? What could the city do to both respond to and make things sort of more interesting for students?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for students to work with existing festivals and galleries. So you've got 44 AD and Fringe Arts Bath. There's lots of opportunities for students to respond to proposals or even propose their own. I think the problem is that there's a lot of framework around that. I don't think there's a lot of space for students to propose their own ideas. I think they're given space to respond to existing programming, but I think there's a lack of space and time given to students who may have their own ideas and thoughts, and maybe slightly on a more short-term basis as well. These things are always planned far in advance. Students don't work like that. And I think that if we were able to offer time and space to students and give it over to them, I think we would have some quite incredible outcomes from the students here.
Thank you for that. Is your sense that if students were more engaged in that type of co-produced sort of way of working when they are students here, that they would be more likely to stay at the end?
Yeah, I think if they experienced that whilst they were here, so they were encouraged to plan and propose ideas and not get sort of bummed down with all of the policy, the hoops you have to jump through in order to make these events happen. I think if there was more of that throughout their time at university, that they would have that confidence post-graduating to go to councils or to cities and say, I've got this amazing idea, I just need you to listen. And I wonder whether we don't necessarily give that time whilst they're a student. They're obviously so focused on deadlines and modules that maybe it's integrating this idea within that and giving them that confidence to feel that they can propose things outside of the existing framework within the city.
Very good, thank you for that. Kate, I was interested in the idea that space is both physical and digital, and this is something that through the Bath Challenge work we've wrestled with, I think, at times. There was a strong emphasis on connecting people to place through walking, through talking, but the digital space is equally somewhere that can happen. So why do you think this sort of mash of creativity and tech is important?
Well, I think that the region as a whole has a huge amount of innovation going on within the creative industries, and that Bath is really well placed to benefit from that. So the program that paid for this particular piece of work, the Bristol and Bath Creative R&D Partnership, has been a 4-year program that's invested a lot in trying to think about creative technology, trying to think about creative ways of using technology. And we're also just embarking on a big new project called My World, which is led by Bristol University, but is about innovation in the screen industries, in immersive media. And I was thinking today about Bridgerton, because there's about to be a new season, isn't there? So there's been quite a lot of talk about it. And of course, if you know Bath, you'll know that quite a lot of Bridgerton is filmed in Bath, posing as London. And so I was thinking about how, the Southwest, Bristol and Bath region, and Bath in particular, is very desirable for Netflix. So, it's not, so the show Bridgerton is the kind of colorful, glossy thing we see on our screens, but in fact there's an entire engine behind that around virtual production, digital production, that whole side of that industry. And I think that the kind of stories that Bath tells about itself tend to not be stories of innovation and digital creativity. There's a strong narrative that's come through in recent years about Bath as a spa city, which obviously it is. So the whole thing about well-being and the city is a story around well-being. But in the past, I think the city's relied quite heavily on the story of the Romans and the shopping story that Bath has become as well. Whereas it seems to me that there's a really interesting story to tell about Bath as a city of innovation, and how in the 21st century digital can really supercharge that. Sorry, terrible word. But that's been what we've been trying to do through Bristol and Bath Creative R&D, and hopefully what will happen through my world as well.
Thank you, Kate. I'm going to come to Alex, and then after that I'm going to open things up for a first round of questions from the audience, both here and online. So do start to think about your questions, and I'll come to you in a second. But Alex, I wanted to pick up on this idea of sort of co-production with, I guess, communities. I've done a fair bit of work in Bath and North East Somerset over the last couple of years, and often how we talk or how we work with diverse communities across the city and the wider North East Somerset area is something that feels quite tricky. It feels like the language of inequality or difference around Bath and North East Somerset is not easy to get right in a place that is generally a lot of the time seen as being, or perceived as being, quite successful. I wonder whether you've got any insights for us about that sense of how you engage wide and diverse communities in that sort of co-production of a creative, healthy place.
Yes, I was already thinking, actually, from what Nicola and Poppy had said, that what I was picking up was the need for some disruption, and that the places, you have these places, you have the river, but there isn't much interaction. And I was just thinking, you need people in there causing trouble. But actually, I was also thinking about, and Poppy saying the students would be up for that, wouldn't they? That's the kind of role students would pick up and run with. But two examples came to mind in relation to all of this, which is one, some of you may know the organisation Entelechy Arts in London, and an amazing project they did with older people. They have almost like a daycare centre for older people, but they do really radical stuff with them, including, trapeze and circus and what have you. But they did a project, I don't know what it was called, but essentially people were in their beds in the street, and people talked to them, because obviously that's a very disruptive, I think it was probably about bed blocking or some issue like that. And that was real older people in beds talking about their own experiences, but obviously it was a creative intervention. And I imagine Bath is an ageing city. Most of the southwest has an older demographic. And then the other thing, when we were driving here, there was a homeless person on the streets. And amazing project that I know about and have sort of been involved in hearing about is a Japanese dance program with homeless men, where a dance artist has worked with the big issue, actually, to identify homeless people, and then created a dance troupe. And they were working in venues, and then they started performing in the street, because they wanted other people to be able to access and see their work. So, very simple ideas, but that's working with people who are marginalised and invisible. I think the point is about making visible the people that you want to work with. So co-production, broadly speaking, in the health world, that tends to be focused on working with people with ill health, people who have experienced health services or have some form of ill health. But I think more broadly, we talk about co-production and co-creation in a participatory arts context as working with with people who aren't artists and enabling creativity through that. I mean, I could talk more about that, but that's just a couple of ideas.
Those are interesting and inspirational ideas. I wondered also whether you had any thoughts on how you sort of make visible the value of sort of health and arts and creativity. I guess what's in my mind is that often the creative or creative tech programs are very driven by economic outputs. You know, they sit within a regional and a national context about measuring jobs and growth and productivity, and that's the outcome that you have to in some way work towards. Often the health or well-being or the metrics of being a thriving place. A, are they there? And B, have you seen any good examples of how they're integrated alongside those more sort of traditional economic goals?
I mean, I think there is evidence around, if you like, the cost benefit of creative interventions to actually reduce costs in, say, health services, which are obviously hugely costly. Up to 40% of our GDP is spent on health. And one of the things about the Marmot work that I was talking about is that, in fact, 80% of our health is not dependent on health services. It's dependent on where we are born, grow, live, work, die, etc., poverty, education, access to green spaces. So, you know, there's a real problem there in terms of that balance. But I think the value thing is, there are progressives, think of the New Zealand government, people who don't value economic output they don't preference that over well-being outcomes, and we can make that case for social value, and I think there is more openness to that, but obviously it depends on who you're trying to convince. There definitely is a case to be made for the social value of the arts. I mean, if you think about children and young people and emotional development, I think it's been a real problem in this country that we focused on talent pipelines, the notion of the arts and creativity being attached to talent and the creative industries, and not focused on the crucial importance of creativity for emotional development and for us, our life, how to live well. So I think we're sort of colluding in that.
That's a very interesting sort of point, and one that I'd recognise as well. And I'd love to talk more about that. But let's thank you, and let's open things up. So are there now? I don't see very well, so I need some help to find people with questions. But I believe Abby is around with a microphone. So if you have a question, please make yourself known.
We've also had one via YouTube.
Okay.
From Penny Hay, House of Imagination. So I'll
Please,
read that one out while people are thinking of questions.
Let's hear Penny.
So, question to all. Imagining what Bath could be in the future, thinking in the long term, what would you like to see happen in the immediate future, here and now?
So who perhaps Nicola, we have to start somewhere. So don't mean to pick on you, but I think the question is around the short term. What would you like to see happen?
In the short term.
In the short term.
How very short term? I mean,
next 10 minutes or.
I think I'd like to see kind of Bath really working together. Actually, I loved your point of we just need to disrupt the city, maybe. So maybe we just all start scattering pink chairs all throughout the city and start sitting down and having conversations and have big bits of paper and make kind of plans and more disruption. And actually, there is so much creativity in Bath, and there are so many, creative hubs scattered in Bath. It would be so lovely to actually get all these threads and interconnections, and everybody just kind of really getting together and really demanding that actually Bath show itself with pride as the kind of creative city that it is and that has been in its history for many years. That's what I do.
That's very good. Yeah. A bit of positive disruption. Poppy, I know you've been involved in a sort of disruption because you've been using space in the city in a sort of temporary use, meanwhile use in the meantime sort of way. Is that another sort of ambition that the city ought to get behind more?
Yeah, definitely. So just to give a bit of background, in collaboration with the studio, we took over empty shops in Bath and gave them to students and creatives. And we hosted an exhibition, a theatre show, and a makers market, just as sort of ideas of bringing creativity. And I think it's just more of that. There's so many empty spaces at the moment in Bath that in the short term we could take over, and we could use not only to benefit the students here and their practice, but as Nicola says, like opening up conversation, like having these spaces people can walk into, and maybe it's a discussion of what these empty spaces and these temporary spaces could be used for, that could benefit not only the creative community but also the city. So yeah, definitely just taking over the unused space and filling it with people and with creatives.
And does that space need to be dispersed across the city in different communities, or is it around focusing on the city centre to create visibility? How would you like to see that work?
I mean, I think as far as we can spread, the better, to be honest with you. There's so many communities outside of the city centre that would benefit from this kind of creative disruption that maybe don't get to access it if they don't get to the city centre. So I think it is branching out and bringing people from the city out into the communities, but also trying to get those communities back with our city as well.
Good, thank you. I don't know if you know the answer to this, so it might be a slightly unfair question to put to you, Alex, but you talked about Manchester having the ambition to be I think you said the UK's first creative health city region. Now, there's always a healthy rivalry between Bristol and Bath and Manchester, and what do you think it is that Manchester are hoping to achieve in the near or medium term through being the UK's first creative health city region?
Well, they talk about, they've got a report out actually which you could Google, that creativity and culture is the social glue, which I think is quite a nice way of imagining it. So it's as though it sits between everything and flows between. Glue doesn't really flow, does it? But you know what I mean. It's sort of
PVA.
It's a connector, and I think this idea of disrupting through being in the shop spaces and making stuff, and the dialogue. It's dialogue as a creative process, isn't it? This emphasis on process, which you're all talking about. So anyway, sorry, that doesn't quite answer your question. What is their ambition? I mean, they are a very ambitious city. They're a city with a lot of challenges, of course. I think they probably are aiming to make this connection between flourishing lives, creativity, health, and their health services, their health, everything that touches on health services or involves health services, whether that be community level or in hospitals and so on. So I think it's bringing those two things together is what they're trying to do.
Okay. That's certainly an interesting thing to go and look at and to find out how they've articulated those sorts of ambitions and aims. I'm still keen to get some questions or thoughts from our audience, so do ask a question if you have one. If not... Oh, okay, great. So, Abby, please find some questions. And if you just say who you are first.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Hello, my name's Scarlett Monnier. I am from Fringe Arts Bath. We got a little name check from Poppy, thank you. Often I come to discussions or there are events talking about creative and cultural strategies and so on. I've been involved so I was a student at Bath Spa, graduated in 2008, and I've been involved in Fringe Arts Bath more or less ever since. These discussions happen and often the same points get raised again and again, and then the discussion happens again and the points get raised again and the discussion happens again and the points get raised again. I have a lot of hope that actually this process will attack and get your teeth stuck in and do something, because it really feels like it will. So a lot of things that have been mentioned, like disruption in the city, like occupying empty spaces, like going out onto the streets, they're already happening. So for example, Fringe Arts Bath does stuff, Bath Fringe Festival, Bath Carnival, there are music festivals across the city. There are a lot of things going on. When you're the one doing the festival, it often feels like it goes unnoticed, or like, people just kind of walk past it, nod, smile, nod. We engage a lot of people, in a more conceptual sense. People walk past, nod, smile, and carry on and talk about how there's a lack of things going on. How do we bring together what's already there and help nourish that? So Fringe Arts Bath, we collaborate loads. We collaborate with Creativity Works, we collaborate with the Holborn Museum's Pathways to Wellbeing projects, we collaborate with Bath Spa students and so on. It's quite big. Some years we'll have 250 artists on board, 36 exhibitions across 15 venues. There's a lot going on, but it does seem to sort of drift unnoticed. Maybe we just don't have time to tell enough people about it. And we always really welcome people on board, and it's so completely open. I don't know where that kind of break is. And it's not just Fringe Arts Bath, there are lots of other people doing lots of really good things. I'm curious as to where that break is between the things happening. Also, I have 50 pink chairs in my garage, and Fringe Arts Bath is coming up at the end of May, and we have space to do these things if you want to. We're really happy to host it, because that, we can make it happen, basically. But genuinely, we have 40 pink chairs in our garage. Thank you for doing this as well.
That's right, thank you, Scarlett. So the offer of the pink chairs, I think, is great. Thank you. The sort of disconnect that you describe is really is something that sort of keeps coming through, doesn't it? And I'm actually wondering whether there's people in the audience who also have views on what that disconnect is and what needs to change in order to sort of increase visibility and increase connection. What do people think?
Thank you. I'm Hetty Dupay, and the Art and Design Manager for the Royal United Hospital. I was involved back in 2019 it was a project that was led by Bath University's research department, and Katie from 44AD and we put forward a proposal to do a project about working with an engineer researcher at Bath University on the flooding of the River Avon and the history, and so we did this project, and it was very, very, we loved doing it, and we had some great sort of experiences doing it. But, and we actually also we were involved in the Forest of the Imagination that year with Penny down at the south, I think it's the South Keys, or anyway, sort of along that river piece. But the problems, and I know that Penny had great problems as well, in working with the council and having permission to sort of have installations in the city and all this kind of thing, just made it so hard. And also we had lots of good feedback, and even the council, there was sort of like thought of, well, we could have a sculpture trail along the river and all of this could happen, but it just sort of seems to peter out. And I think at the end of the day, it has to be from the leaders of the community, if you like, who really kind of take it on board and say, this is what we value, and it is a sort of an old sort of saying always that Bath is about the tourism and that kind of thing, but we really have to put the community first and make those brave decisions and disrupt and allow that disruption to happen without giving us so many barriers to get through in order to do anything. People lose the will to actually try, I think.
I certainly recognise that through the conversations that we've heard, and people, of course, have long memories around having tried and perhaps in the past met sort of resistance, and as you say, the sort of energy and the goodwill can easily sort of disappear. But I'm also struck by the idea that permission is needed, and it's often easy to think about that means the council or the local authority giving permission. But there's a sort of sense in which lots of institutions and communities and individuals also have a leadership role to play in creating that change. I mean, Kate, you talked earlier about the university becoming a social enterprise. Forgotten what you. Community interest company or a social enterprise. Social enterprise. I mean, that feels like a sort of strong leadership statement within the city. And clearly the university sees itself as a player in terms of trying to make this transition happen.
Yes, to use the phrase I use, the anchor institution around, which can help drive forward some of those discussions, I think, because. And I think it also goes back to that point I made earlier about the stories we tell about ourselves and how we need to be telling a story about creativity and not about tourism, if you see what I mean. And I think it's really possible to accomplish things even in an environment where either the local government or the regional government or the national government isn't particularly interested in that kind of way of seeing things, as we were discussing earlier, with a kind of move against the idea of constant growth and the talent pipeline, the hideous phrase, the talent pipeline, etc. So, I do hear from people in Bath this thing over and over, like Scarlett mentioned, like yourself, Hattie, that this frustration about things happening and not being recognized. But hopefully, it feels to me as though things are beginning to shift and change now, and that might be partially because of this building being where it is in the city, and the way in which that can shift some emphasis from the center of the city to somewhere slightly out of the center of the city, and perhaps that can lead to more engagement with what you were talking about, Poppy, which is that very stark divisions in Bath between the haves and the have-nots. It's a city of real disparities along those lines, which is also not part of the story of Bath, is it? It's really hidden from view until you get to know the city a bit better. So, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble.
No, thank you for that. And finding a language and a way to talk about those differences and those inequalities so that it's not necessarily just framed as disadvantage or poverty or it's not just framed as a lack of something, but it's framed as an opportunity to bring something that changes the overall offer of Bath. Is an that's a conundrum I think the city.
Well, it is the Bath Challenge. That's why we called the project that. That's why we use that term. And one of the initiatives that happened in the meanwhile was a series of workshops where people who attended were given their bus fare, because even on the level of public transit from the communities outside the centre of Bath is too expensive. So there's really basic issues like that. And the Connected Bath report that you and I worked on together, Stephen, which was to do about digital connectivity in Bath. Bath has got terrible gaps in terms of connectivity around the city as well. So there are big issues, but at the same time, there's people really wanting to engage and to make things happen.
Indeed, thank you. It is shocking that in terms of access to fast digital connectivity, Bath and North East Somerset is the bottom of all of the localities within the West of England region. And if you delve, as Kate said, a step deeper, then the correlation between other measures of disadvantage and lack of access to good internet is pretty much sort of parallel. So there are hidden things that also contribute to those long-term structural disadvantages that exist. There were more hands, I believe, Abby.
Hello everyone, great conversation, thanks. My name is John Davey and I'm part of the Bristol and Bath Creative R&D team, and I'm interested to hear your version of who are the key players in...
I'm very sorry.
Are we distracting you, Stephen? Sorry.
Sorry.
My question is...
Please everybody turn your phones on to silent if you haven't done so already.
I'm interested to hear what you think, who you think the key players are that have to make the moves to make this place more cohesive. My experience of creative ecologies is that you need some, we talked about leadership earlier on, you need some key leadership institutions to realise that they've got more, they will have more success in the long term if they don't just try to plough their own little furrow and be in their own silos. They have to step outside of their own key performance indicators to understand there's a bigger system that they're part of to make it cohere. Who are the players in Bath that could do that, and what's the play? What's the unique USP that Bath could offer, like Manchester's going for a creative health? You know, other cities have other kinds of flavours, textures, colours, you know. Who are the players and what's the pitch for Bath?
That's a big question to respond to, I think. So Nicola, who? No. Give me a sense of a couple of the organisations or institutions or groupings that are coming together. I mean, you're involved with and are leading one around the Bath Art Depot. How has this group come together, and how do they have that sort of confidence to try and lead what seems to be a quite disruptive idea for the city?
Okay. Well, we initially the group that Bath Art Depot came together just looking for studio space. So I'm an artist. I have a studio a 25-minute drive away from Bath because I couldn't find any large enough space in Bath that was affordable. And lots of students who come here actually then go on to Bristol to find studio spaces. So there's a real lack of decent-sized studio space in Bath. And there's also, I think, a lack of a really large gallery space that could take kind of international contemporary shows, could be shown in Bath, as well as local things. But I guess initially it started looking for studio spaces, and we got a map of Bath, and we put post-it notes on all empty buildings that could be potential studio spaces. And then I think it was Matt McCabe and Fergus Fielding who actually said, oh, the island, you know, the bus depot is about to move off the island. There are these big hangars on the island. And we went to see the island, and it just kind of, I guess the project then became more ambitious because the island is just so perfectly located. It's earmarked in the Bath Riverside scheme as one of the kind of destinations that bookends the scheme. So you have Pulteney Weir one end and Western Island the other end. And the thought of it just becoming more student housing or more luxury flats, I mean, why is that a destination, you know? And it seemed as well the island is not very well known, and it's a real barrier with the kind of, between Twerton and Weston, you have the railway line, you have the road, you have the river, you have the island, you have the canal, and then you get to the other side. And we started to work with some MA students from Reading University, actually, architectural students, who started to actually map how, you know, it joins the cycle path, you could have river connections, how you could kind of open up to connect to different communities. And we made connections with, I don't know if you know, NDSM in Amsterdam, and a group of 100 artists took over a shipyard there, and it's been amazing. Eva de Klerk is hopefully coming over to do a lecture later this year, but they've had a massive success, and I think Amsterdam really understands that actually in a city where property is getting more and more valuable, it's so important to have spaces that are kind of breeding grounds for creativity. And they actually have somebody on their council who I spoke to, who's the head of these breeding grounds innovation spaces. And in Amsterdam, they have 60 of these spread out through the city. And they see how important it is to have kind of, you know, buildings where artists can be kind of free and do creative things within the city. Otherwise, you lose the soul of the city, kind of the lungs of the city kind of go out, and suddenly you've just got lots of expensive houses and no life going on. And I think with Western Island, there's a real potential, and especially its location with the art school here, is actually to create a kind of space that's embedded in the existing community and cultural structures that are already there, to create kind of somewhere where people can have kind of takeover spaces or just kind of meet and discuss, and actually a space that's large enough to really put Bath on the map internationally as well as locally.
Thank you. So, John, that sounds like a quite strong potential sort of unexpected USB for Bath. I'm sure there are others, but I think that you know, if you think of Bath having a creative commune or community on an island in the river, is not the first thing that normally comes to mind. So I think there's something very exciting around that. It's sort of coming up. We've got 5 minutes or so left, and I will come back to each of my panellists for a few concluding remarks. But if there was one or two more short questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Stephen, it's Jamie talking, but as I walk to the questioner, there's a comment from the remote audience member.
Yeah.
He says, I think there's a danger in searching for a theory of everything, a desire to ensure that everything is joined up and everybody knows what's going on. And then they say, what about a constellated ecosystem, creating the conditions for art and creativity to thrive as effectively as possible? So perhaps that's along the lines of you know, with the island or the depot and other places, kind of other anchors or a variety of anchors kind of cropping up through the city. Right, I'm coming over to you, Rob, somehow.
Hi, Rob Delius from Stride Clown Architects. I would share very much the sentiments from this evening that there is an awful lot of creativity in the city. And we had a competition a few years ago called Imagine Bath, and there were about 75 entries and nothing has come out of that. I had a meeting with someone who was quite influential in the city a few years ago and pitched an idea, and they said Bath is where good ideas come to die. How do we change that mindset?
When I first came to Bristol, I moved to Bristol 20 odd years ago, and people used to say to me that Bristol was the graveyard of ambition. So I think those ideas are not sort of dissimilar in some ways. Maybe people say it less about Bristol now, so things change, I guess. Was there any more? Was there one more question before we go back to the panel?
We've got a couple on.
There's a man at the very back.
Yes,
who's
I'm
had his
coming.
hand
I
up
know,
for
I'm coming
ages.
to him. I'm just letting Stephen know that we've got others online, but you know.
I think we've probably got time for one more, I'm afraid, and then we'll come back to the panel on some of these issues.
Yep.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Pivchevich. I hold a space for a community group, people representing a variety of neighbourhoods in this city, but also in organisations like XR, Transition Towns, Business West, the council, and several others. And we've been very curious about, you know, what is the story of place, and the story of place, which kind of has been shaped, organised by our geology, our ecology, our history of settlement here, to try to service some sort of essence such that we can understand how we might as a city respond to the future. A long way of saying, coming back to process, what we've understood really as the vocation of the city in terms of responding to the future challenges which are sort of crashing on our shores, is around dissolving barriers between our diversities, between our neighbourhoods, within ourselves, and healing fractures of you know, the ways in which we've wounded each other over history, such that we can get to a more just, connected, more circular, more land-based economy to which Bath can contribute. So I'm very interested in how we might collaborate with artists to bring this to life. And I'm, in my desultory way, kind of trying to make those connections across the city. But I'd love to have some advice as to how we might collaborate together to bring this vocation to life. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So to return to the panel and to start to sort of conclude things. So we've heard from the web the idea that perhaps we focus too much on big strategies and plans and try and join things up, whereas what we ought to do is celebrate the fact that there is a diversity and a variety of practice and activity in different places. We heard from Rob about the fact that Bath can perhaps be perceived as as I said, the graveyard of ambition, or somewhere that doesn't support big ideas as well as it could. And then we heard from Paul this sort of idea that artists are important, which I'm sure will be music to the ears of Natasha and many people in the room. So I guess the question is what do we need to do differently to bring artists and creatives more into those sort of conversations? So, Poppy, any of those questions, which would you like to answer?
I think the last one's about how to get artists into these spaces, and I think it might be the higher kind of powers maybe letting go of control a little bit. I think there's an expectation that finalised projects have to deliver something very important or valuable and maybe financial as well. And I think if councils, governing bodies can kind of let go of that idea a little bit and be more open to experimentation. I think you mentioned that earlier, Nicola. Failure as well, a space to make mistakes and to learn from them. I think that would be how we can connect projects and artists. I think just having that open space, that open dialogue where nothing necessarily has to be finalised, and finding the value through that process and not necessarily the outcome as well. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you very much. Kate, do any of those questions leap out at you as ones that you'd like to respond to?
Well, I guess just to say that, the pandemic is not over, and we can't really underestimate the effect that it'll have on the city, and the ways in which the city might change in unexpected ways, in ways that we haven't thought of yet, and that might bring opportunities. And I just to kind of hope that the people in the room and people that we're associated with will be on the lookout for those opportunities, and to want to try to make change in the city, and to try to move forward with exciting and new ideas in the city, as we begin to, well, fingers crossed, continue to emerge from the last 2 years. I think the changes in Bath could be really fundamental, because of what's happened to retail, because of what's happened to travel, etc.
No, good, thank you. Alex, it clearly can't expect you to answer for Bath specifically, but in terms of those sorts of questions in a sort of more general way, what would you feel? How do you up the ambition, or how do you create that federation, or how do you create the space, the chinks where the artists and the creatives can come in?
I mean, I have to say I respond to this notion of an ecology that is very diverse and that builds on existing assets and people's culture, because there's culture everywhere. So I'm attracted to that sort of collaborative, how do we vision the future through a kind of collective which connects to, obviously, the environment and all the challenges we're facing. And I think one of the things that I come back to is this idea that creativity and the imagination particularly are linked to hope, and that our brains can't have hope without imagination. So we need to work collaboratively at a time when there are so many challenges globally. and locally. But I also just wanted to bring up, because it was coming through quite strongly, this idea of a sort of rather oppressive council with boring, you know, idea killer people in it, and that I think we all have to be careful not to create a kind of them and us situation, because there'll be people in all of the public services who are really struggling and really challenged, and you know, they have so many problems. And I think often the creative response can be, we can actually do something differently, we can help. What is your most knotty problem? What have you got no answer for? I mean, this happens in health, you know, clinicians, what have you got no answer for, no medication for, nothing? We can help. And, you know, extraordinary things come from that. So I think that sort of attitude is the territory of creative people, and that's breaking down of those hierarchies and thinking relationally about how you make change happen, even within the institutions and the establishment. So it's both things.
That's very good, thank you. Finally, Nicola, I heard from Scarlett and others this sort of sense of frustration that conversations have taken place and there's been some energy and then barriers have been encountered and the energy has dissipated. Some people get fed up. Some people then say, hey, let's do a project to sort of get everything energized again. Is Bath Art Depot going to break through that cycle?
Let's hope so. I actually bumped into somebody who was very involved in crane works on the street the other day. And a lot of people put a lot of effort into that to try and make that kind of crane work area an arts quarter. And he told me that actually he thought the economic impact that was lost for the city was 44 million a year, which if by the time the idea was started up to now would be something like 880 million pounds was lost to the city, economic impact. But I kind of think it's so easy to kind of, you know, people say, well, will this project work? What's the economic impact? You know, how will it help? And I think we really have to look at things differently. And actually, Kate Rayworth, who's written this brilliant book, Donut Economics, has been really helpful. And I think we have to start seeing things as a circular economy, and actually how, you know, why do we need so much kind of financial gain and financial reward? We've got to kind of, you know, live and be happy, like Finland, didn't they get the highest rate or something the other day? And I think actually that Bath declared the climate emergency. I think actually creating an arts quarter on the island, and we could kind of make it completely self-sustainable using the Weir as a hydropower that's already an initiative that's been put in, and actually using the existing structures that are there, and actually really addressing the climate emergency. And, you know, it could be an island that really shows how Bath is actually, you know, creating space to kind of address these issues and actually kind of feed out into the community and actually, you know, going forward.
Thank you so much. So Bath is not an island, but it could have an island. That would be great. We've come to the end of our time. I'm sorry to people who online and here who had questions that we didn't get to answer. I think most of our panelists are around for a little while longer, so please feel free to come and ask people. It's been a great discussion. I think what I take away is this sense that if different outcomes or different hopes exist for the future, then it means also being brave enough to do something different. And we've heard some good inspirational ideas about what that might look like. So please thank our speakers. And I will hand back to Natasha, who's going to lead us through to the street area outside to hear from Mash, I think.
Oh, thanks so much. That was really exciting. Maybe we need to start another narrative, which is not about kind of us being so dispersed and more together, and then and that might just work. So thank you so much. So now we've got a couple of things we need you to do, and that is walk outside and see the amazing work by MASH. They're going to give a really short presentation about their involvement in the project and artists as researchers. And then there's some postcards around, fill them in, put them in the boxes, go on MASH's Padlet and add some of your own comments. And then after that, we're going to meet outside and we're going to go on a walk together to the island. And if you've never been to the island, even if we only imagine that it could become a space for all of us, we should walk there this evening. And there'll be some kind of facts about the kind of the history of the area as you walk. So there'll be people in pink coats. Pink, we've had a lot of pink tonight. So mash, a drink, and then meet outside, and we're going to walk to the island, and then after that we are going to go to the Lock's Bucket Inn for a drink if you'd like to join us. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks for a brilliant night. Thanks, Abby, for helping put it all together. Thanks to the amazing guys who've done the live streaming.